virtual manipulatives. So we think about things like, so you're doing addition and you want to see things represented using these different manipulatives. Using Classroom Suite, either at a single computer or on the interactive screen is another way. Let's just think about Kurzweil for a second. So I'm guessing you all know that Kurzweil is great for helping with reading. But if we're thinking about all kids, the composition is huge. So there's a talking word processor. You might not necessarily have Kurzweil be set to speak as you're typing, but a great strategy actually after you've finished writing is to have Kurzweil then read everything back to you, probably with headphones if you're in a group setting, but to read back your story, because then if you've missed something, if you've missed punctuation, although Kurzweil 3000 won't lose a breath if you forget to put in a period, a full stop, you're more likely to discern it that way than if you're just looking visually at the screen. But what about the electronic dictionaries? I mean, just think about any kid. I can remember parent-teacher meetings when my son was in 2nd grade, and the teacher telling me that my son needed to kind of work on his strategy for using a dictionary because he didn't like to do it. And so I actually questioned him, why that was the case, and he just said that it was boring, number one, and number two, it just took him a long time. And this is a kid that's reading at grade level. You add into this then maybe a student who's reading below grade level, and that problem is just much worse. And then finally, looking at something like fill in the blanks. So you've got a test or a worksheet that you've brought into Kurzweil, and you want students to be able to kind of fill out their answers inside the technology. So just by virtue of using our fill in the blanks, if there's underlines in the test, some of you may know, Kurzweil 3000 will insert little text boxes into which the students can type. And again, stuff that we're talking about here are strategies that certainly in San Diego, but also in other districts, are being used with all sorts of students. Looking at some of the ideas that I've suggested here is kind of just to kind of get the conversation going. And again, I don't mind if what you want to share relates to another program that you're using, but thinking again, this is tier 1, we're trying to think of something that could apply to all students. What are some other examples, do you think? And if you're knowledgeable about Kurzweil, by all means share that too. What do you think? What are some other things that you might use technology for with all of your students? Notebook software. Summaries, yeah. So is that something you're doing or just something you're thinking of?
My son has a friend have Kurzweil at home as well as at school. So I use the summary feature because 20 pages, that's just way overwhelming.
Right.
So
yeah.
we summarize and same thing basically.
Yeah. What else? What are some things? Yes, ma'am.
The researching and the note-taking.
Yeah, so researching. And actually we get that into that in another tier as well. You just think, where you find a topic of interest, right, and you want to kind of find some information out. I mean, a lot of us obviously kind of Google, but if you need that additional help, obviously using online encyclopedias and stuff is good. Did you have a comment?
Are you asking for things that we use for all students?
Yes, yeah, for the most part right now.
Using something like Audacity to do oral responses to text or answers.
Okay. And is that something you're using just are you using throughout your province or just within a district? Or? I'm being hopeful.
Just within my classroom.
Okay. And how do you find the kids do, given that they're all using the same thing?
Good.
Yeah? Yeah. Excellent. Yes?
Well, I talked about voice chat, and I think the trick that we're doing is that kids aren't using the same thing. Kids are using things differently based on themselves as learners.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, for sure. That's great. So what are some examples of technology that some of your kids are using?
Well, in Alberta, we tend towards rewrite goals.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the same things you talked about are part of that package.
Yep.
Using movies or iMovie or Movie Maker to express themselves, Audacity, VoiceThread. There are practically, in the district that I'm going to take over tomorrow, smart boards in every classroom. Video conferencing, lots of things.
That's terrific. Wow. So with the video conferencing, actually, that's a term we've not heard today so far. So is that actually allowing students to communicate with other schools in the district?
Yes, and other schools around the world.
Wow, that is terrific. So let's just digress for 1 second. Here's a word that I often, I mean, and some great things that are great. Imagine the engagement level. I'm just thinking back to like when I was in school. I mean, just think back to when we were in school, and then the difference between what this lady's just describing, where you got an opportunity to engage. I might have had pen pals when I was a kid, you know, writing to different people in different countries. I sure as heck didn't get to video conference with them. So that's got to be amazing, just to kind of say, you know, you were just speaking with someone in some other country in Europe or whatever it might be. That's great. What about over this side of the room? Are there any types of technologies that you're using with all your kids? What about you? Yes.
What about visual organizer software that's consistent across the board?
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking something like Inspiration, something? Kidspiration? Yeah. Yeah, those are great. Excellent tools. Yeah, absolutely.
All students use WordQ as a
Yeah. Yeah, WordQ. Now, they also have other programs, don't they, for speech recognition? Is it SpeakQ? Yeah, so, you know, also kind of just really kind of great examples. How many of you are using any of the accessibility features of Windows or Mac, for that matter, if you're using Mac OS? Some of you? You know, one of the things that we often kind of talk about, I mean, I can think of plenty of other things that are free or nearly free. Certainly the free starts with your operating system, so kind of just thinking about ways that if you were even just using Microsoft Word and had no specialized technology of sorts, you can obviously, but with both Windows and Mac, as I'm sure you know or have heard of, have the system speak out selections of text and so forth. There's Read Please is another site that you can go to and download a free reader. It's really basic, but you know, it's an option that you can consider. In the case of using technology, though, with all students, one of the things that we're witnessing, it's really a great equalizer. I think to the lady's point here about how kids might use the same thing differently or even different things, one of the great things, though, is that you've no longer got the situation where you just have a couple of computers in the back of the room and just the special ed kids are going back to use them. This is something that can really become part of your regular instruction, where all kids are using the same thing. I actually did get to witness at a conference, it was a couple of years ago now, but this was actually an educator from the state of Kentucky in the US. And what she was there to talk about was how she had gotten technology in her classroom that was actually designed initially to address the needs of her students with learning disabilities. What she did, she trained those kids, or had those kids trained in the use of that particular technology, and then made them the ambassadors of that technology to then go forth and train every other student in the class. So every student now uses it, but what she was able to do was to take kids that probably would have been the least engaged in her classroom. They now had this newfound knowledge, this newfound skill that no other student in class had but them. So an interesting way, and I've seen that done in different ways, even with something like Kurzweil, where schools have created what we'll affectionately call a Kurzweil club. And you simply get students to kind of be in this club to help with, you know, converting text, preparing things that are going to be used in class by other students. But it doesn't have to always be that you look at technology and you kind of raise your hands and thinking, when am I going to find time to do this? There are really some very creative and inventive ways of getting any technology. It doesn't have to be Kurzweil, anything really. And just recognize that those little bodies in the room that you're working with are those digital natives, and for them, none of this is going to be that intimidating. Anything else anyone wants to add then at this tier that you've thought of?
The internet is the biggest tool used universally by all students, right? To find
Perfect. Yeah, the internet. It's a great point. And actually, I think it speaks to this point that you made before as well about kind of doing the online research. That absolutely, I think most schools have some measure of internet connection. Being able to kind of make that medium accessible to all students, that's a huge point. So thanks for bringing that up. It's an important one to remember.
And again, built in.
And it is built in, sure. Incidentally, actually, when I think back to San Diego, all of the netbook computers that they purchased have has a built-in like Wi-Fi card or a wireless card to work with broadband from the phone companies. So the students are actually, I should have pointed out, the Kurzweil they're using actually is the web license. So they're actually able to not only allow Kurzweil to work from anywhere, including the home, but they're also tracking what the students are doing with it as well. And Steve made mention of the progress monitoring software, vPort. and that's something that we're going to be introducing this year, is actually a connection between Kurzweil and that program. So as far as being able to kind of measure, you can even kind of add questions to Kurzweil and then the answers in vport and automatically score and grade, essentially, the work the students have been doing. So that'll be an interesting thing coming later this year. So we're moving to a narrower band of our triangle then at this point. So these are some kids that are going to require some more intensive instruction than, I mean, to Steve's point, maybe 50% of the kids are those that can kind of just do things on their own. Now we're talking about kids with specific issues. So, we were talking about those kind of online tools. I also kind of added in there just the kind of the whole e-content site. So now you mentioned that you were giving gift cards to Bookshare in honor of all the speakers at the show this year. Is that what I heard? Or was it just Steve?
Oh, well, Steve is special, but we did one in honor of you too.
Well, so the reason I ask is, has Bookshare now resolved their use model so that it can be now used in Canada, or is that coming soon? Because I've heard from them some exciting news that maybe that would be happening within the not too distant future.
Do you want the short or the long answer? There are many ways that Canadians can now access Bookshare. Those ways are still less than what Americans can do, but we're working on the barriers that are in place. But there are many ways. We did it because we knew that we did the donations on your behalf because we knew it was an organization that you supported, and so we did it for you as our gift to you, not really because we were celebrating that Canadians suddenly had unlimited access to Bookshare.
All right. Because I was getting quite excited for a second to think that you're just announcing something.
70,000 books have international rights now on Bookshare, so
wow.
it's a big number. It's not yet the big number, but it's coming. We're making progress.
Well, 70,000 e-titles, that's pretty intense. I mean, that's a lot of reading. So if that's got international rights, so could some, because I don't know, so it's a good point to kind of bring up. Can a Canadian student today, if they qualified, could they download any one of those 70,000 titles today?
No.
No?
It depends on how they're registered. So as Bookshare is signing new publishers, and so they just signed, there was like 5 new publishers this winter, that as they're signing new publishers, they're making it part of their contract with the publishers that they get the international rights to their books. And so there are certain publishers' works for which they have the international rights and therefore can get into that place where people with postal codes instead of zip codes can get access to them, which is the same place as where we can get access to the Gutenberg collection.
Right.
And so on. So it's coming, yes.
Well, that's good. That's very exciting. Anybody here not know what Bookshare is? Is that a new name? So a couple of you. So bookshare.org, that's the website that you can go to, is a non-profit organization headquartered in California. I mean, if you're saying there's 70,000 internationally, I had heard a number of 90,000 titles the last time I spoke with Bookshare, but it's been a while. So they're constantly adding electronic versions of print materials. So certainly, all of the public domain stuff, that's been there for years. I mean, you mentioned Project Gutenberg as one.
It's a funny, their mission now is to sign publishers to contracts. So let's say, for example, Scholastic has signed with international rights. So that was awesome news. But it's now up to people to post Scholastic books. It doesn't mean, and once they're posted, Bookshare is an organization that goes 2 ways, right? People need to submit the books that then are up on Bookshare that then can be downloaded. You know what I mean? Like Bookshare is not, they're now doing 4 more books because we donated 2 books in each of your name, but Bookshare doesn't put the books up. Primarily it comes from other people who submit them, right? So the fact that there are the rights to 70,000 books doesn't mean that there are 70,000 books. It means that if you had a book that met the international rights and you made a digital copy,